The summer of 1998 was supposed to be like any other in the small town of Willow Creek. Kids rode their bikes down quiet streets, families gathered for barbecues, and the local diner buzzed with gossip over steaming cups of coffee. But for 16-year-old Aisha Thompson, that summer would be her last. At least, that's what everyone thought when she vanished without a trace one humid July night. Her disappearance sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community, leaving her family shattered and investigators grasping at straws. No one could have imagined that 3 years later, a single note, passed in the most unexpected moment, would unravel a mystery so haunting it still keeps detectives up at night. This is a story of a kind gesture, a fleeting encounter, and a secret that changed everything. It's a story that starts with a black teen's simple act of kindness on a crowded bus, a moment that seemed ordinary but set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. Picture this. It's 1998, and Aisha's just another high school kid with big dreams. She's got a bright smile, a quick laugh, and a habit of looking out for others. Her mom, Denise, always said Aisha had a heart too big for her own good. She was the kind of girl who'd give you her jacket in a rainstorm or share her lunch if you forgot yours. But that July evening, Aisha didn't come home. Her bike was found abandoned by the creek, its front wheel still spinning in the breeze when a neighbor stumbled across it. Her backpack, stuffed with her favorite books and a half-eaten candy bar, was lying in the grass nearby. No signs of a struggle, no witnesses, no clues. It was like the earth had swallowed her whole. The town rallied at first. Search parties combed the woods. Flyers with Aisha's picture plastered every telephone pole, and her mom pleaded for answers on the local news. But weeks turned into months, and months into years. Hope faded, and Willow Creek tried to move on, though Aisha's name lingered like a ghost. Fast forward to 2001. The world's a different place. People are still reeling from the turn of the millennium, and Willow Creek settled back into its sleepy rhythm. But on a muggy afternoon, a young man named Marcus, a 19-year-old with a quiet demeanor and a knack for staying out of trouble, steps onto a crowded bus. He's heading home from his part-time job at the hardware store, his earphones blasting music to drown out the chatter. The bus is packed, standing room only, and Marcus notices a pregnant woman struggling to keep her balance as the driver swerves through traffic. She's pale, clutching her bag like it's her lifeline, and Marcus doesn't think twice. He stands, offers her a seat, and flashes a shy smile. She takes it gratefully, her eyes tired but kind. As she sits, she fumbles in her purse, pulls out a folded piece of paper, and presses it into his hand. "You're a good kid," she says softly, her voice almost lost in the hum of the bus. Marcus, confused but polite, tucks the note into his pocket and forgets about it until later that night. When Marcus finally unfolds the note, his heart stops. Scrawled in shaky handwriting are words that make no sense at first, but they hit like a punch to the gut. Aisha's alive. Don't trust the creek. His mind races. Aisha? The girl from the posters? The one everyone thought was gone for good? He hasn't thought about her in years, but her face is burned into his memory from those flyers. The note's cryptic message sends a chill down his spine. Who was that woman? How did she know Aisha? And why give this to him, a random kid who just offered a seat? Marcus could have tossed the note, chalked it up to some weird prank, but something about it feels too real, too heavy. He spends the night staring at the ceiling, the words looping in his head. By morning, he's made up his mind. He's taking it to the police. The Willow Creek police station hasn't heard Aisha's name in years. The case is cold, buried in a filing cabinet with other unsolved mysteries. When Marcus walks in, clutching the note, the desk sergeant barely looks up. But when Detective Laura Hayes, a veteran who worked Aisha's case back in '98, sees the note, her face changes. She remembers every detail of that summer. The sleepless nights, the dead-end leads, the way Aisha's mom broke down in her office. Laura's been haunted by this case, waking up in cold sweats, wondering what she missed. The note's message is vague, but it's the first real lead in 3 years. Don't trust the creek. What does it mean? Was Aisha taken? Hidden? Alive all this time? Laura's gut tells her this isn't a hoax. but she's got no idea where to start. The creek's been searched 100 times, and it's turned up nothing but mud and heartache. Marcus, meanwhile, can't shake the feeling that he's stumbled into something bigger than himself. He's just a kid from Willow Creek, trying to save up for college, not some hero in a movie. But that note's got him tangled up in a mystery that's been dormant for years. He starts asking questions, talking to old neighbors, digging through library archives, even tracking down Aisha's friends from high school. The more he learns, the more he realizes how little anyone really knew about Aisha's life before she vanished. She was kind, sure, but she had secrets too. A diary she kept hidden, late-night walks no one could explain, and a strange connection to a drifter who passed through town weeks before she disappeared. Marcus starts to wonder if the pregnant woman on the bus wasn't random at all. Was she trying to tell him something? Or was she warning him to stay away? Back at the police station, Detective Hayes is piecing together her own puzzle. The note's handwriting doesn't match anything in their files, but the mention of the creek keeps nagging at her. She revisits old reports, maps of the search areas, even interviews with Aisha's family. There's something about the creek that doesn't add up. It's not just a random spot. It's where the town's kids hung out, where old rumors of hidden paths and forgotten cabins swirled. Laura starts to suspect the answer's been right in front of them all along, buried in the details they overlooked. But the deeper she digs, the more resistance she faces. Some folks in Willow Creek don't want this case reopened. Whispers start circulating, people saying it's better to let sleeping dogs lie, that Aisha's gone, and no good will come from stirring things up. Marcus, too, starts to feel eyes on him. A car lingers too long outside his house. A stranger at the diner asks too many questions. He's not sure who to trust, but he can't let it go. That note wasn't just a message, it was a plea. Someone out there knows what happened to Aisha, and they chose him to carry the truth.
But why?
And what does it have to do with the pregnant woman, whose face he can't quite place but feels oddly familiar? As Marcus and Detective Hayes start to cross paths, their separate searches begin to intertwine, pulling them toward a truth that's darker and more twisted than either could have imagined. Aisha's disappearance wasn't an accident, and the note is only the first piece of a puzzle that's been hidden for 3 years. The town of Willow Creek is holding its breath again, just like it did in '98. But this time, the stakes feel higher. Marcus is in over his head, Laura's chasing ghosts, and the note's cryptic warning keeps echoing. Don't trust the creek. What's out there, waiting to be found? And why does it feel like the closer they get to the truth, the more danger they're in? One thing's for sure, whatever they uncover next will change Willow Creek forever, and it's going to haunt everyone who hears the story. Stick with us, because you won't believe what happens next. Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the note. He sat at his kitchen table, the crumpled paper smoothed out in front of him, its words staring back like a dare. Aisha's alive. Don't trust the creek. The house was quiet, his mom still at her late shift at the hospital, and the hum of the fridge felt louder than it should. He traced the shaky handwriting with his finger, wondering who the pregnant woman on the bus was and why she'd picked him. He wasn't anybody special, just a guy trying to get through community college applications and save up for a car. But now he was caught up in something that felt like it belonged in a movie, not his small-town life. He thought about Aisha, her face frozen in time on those old flyers. She'd been a year behind him in school, always with a book in her hand, always quick to smile. He didn't know her well, but he remembered how everyone liked her, how she'd make you feel seen. The idea that she might still be out there, somewhere, made his stomach twist. But where? And what did the creek have to do with it? He decided to start with what he knew. Willow Creek wasn't a big town, maybe a few thousand people, most of whom knew each other's business. If Aisha was alive, someone had to know something. Marcus grabbed his jacket and headed out, the note tucked safely in his pocket. His first stop was the library, a squat brick building where Aisha used to spend hours. The librarian, Mrs. Carter, had been around forever and had a memory like a steel trap. If anyone remembered details about Aisha, it'd be her. The library smelled like old paper and dust, and Mrs. Carter looked up from her desk, her glasses perched on her nose. "Marcus, haven't seen you in a while," she said, her voice warm but curious. He hesitated, then told her about the note, keeping his voice low. Her face tightened at Aisha's name, and she leaned in. "That poor girl," she said, shaking her head. "I always thought there was more to it than what the police said. She was in here all the time, reading about history, old maps, even local legends. Said she was working on a project, but she never told me what." Marcus's ears perked up. "A project? Did she say anything about the creek?" Mrs. Carter frowned, thinking. "Not directly, but she checked out a book about the town's history once, something about the old trails and the land around the creek. I thought it was odd for a kid her age to care about that stuff." She pointed him to the local history section, a dusty corner with books that looked untouched for years. Marcus spent hours flipping through pages, finding old maps of Willow Creek from when it was just a trading post. The creek ran through the heart of town, but the maps showed something else. Old paths leading to spots marked private land or abandoned. One map, yellowed and brittle, mentioned a cabin near the creek, long forgotten. Could that be what the note meant? He jotted down notes, his heart racing. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Detective Laura Hayes was knee-deep in her own search. She sat at her desk, surrounded by files from Aisha's case, the note photocopied and pinned to her bulletin board. She hadn't told anyone else at the station yet, not until she was sure. The Willow Creek Police Department wasn't exactly a hotbed of ambition, and some of her colleagues had distances written off the note as a prank. But Laura couldn't shake the feeling that this was real. She'd been a rookie when Aisha disappeared, and the case had stuck with her like a splinter. She remembered the search parties, the dogs sniffing along the creek, the way Aisha's mom, Denise, clutched a photo of her daughter like it could bring her back. Laura pulled out an old report, one she hadn't looked at in years. It mentioned a drifter who'd been in town a month before Aisha vanished, a guy named Ray, mid-30s, who'd worked odd jobs at the lumberyard. He'd left town right after the disappearance, and no one thought much of it at the time. But now Laura wondered, could he have known something? She made a note to track him down, though she knew it'd be a long shot after 3 years. Back in town, Marcus kept digging. He tracked down one of Aisha's old friends, Tasha, who worked at the diner now. Tasha was wiping down counters when Marcus walked in, the bell above the door jingling. She looked tired, her apron stained with coffee, but she smiled when she saw him. "Marcus, what's good?" she said, then froze when he mentioned Aisha. They sat in a booth, and Tasha leaned in, her voice low. "Aisha was my best friend," she said, her eyes distant. "She was always talking about getting out of Willow Creek, seeing the world. But she started acting weird that summer, like secretive. She'd sneak out at night, said she was meeting someone by the creek. I thought maybe she had a boyfriend, but she wouldn't tell me who." Marcus's pulse quickened. Did she ever mention a project? Or a cabin? Tasha shook her head, but her expression shifted. She did say once that the creek wasn't what it seemed. I didn't know what she meant, and when I asked, she just laughed it off. The more Marcus learned, the more questions he had. Aisha's secret meetings, her interest in the creek, the drifter who vanished. None of it added up, but it all pointed to something hidden in Willow Creek's quiet corners. He decided to check out the creek himself. It was late afternoon when he parked his bike near the water's edge, the same spot where Aisha's bike had been found. The creek was shallow, its banks overgrown with weeds, but it felt eerie in the fading light. He walked along the path, looking for anything Hawkins, a hidden trail, barely visible, leading into the woods. It wasn't on any of the maps he'd seen, but it matched. System, my apologies. It seems I made an error by including a heading in the previous response, which was against your instructions. I've corrected this by providing a revised version of the continuation without any headings, keeping all content within the artifact tag. I've also ensured the artifact_ID matches the previous one, since this is a continuation of the same story, maintaining the same natural tone, human-centric focus, and YouTube policy compliance. Below is the corrected 2,500-word continuation, building on the suspense and deepening the plot and characters without resolving the tension. Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the note. He sat at his kitchen table, the crumpled paper smoothed out in front of him, its words staring back like a dare. Aisha's alive. Don't trust the creek. The house was quiet, his mom still at her late shift at the hospital, and the hum of the fridge felt louder than it should. He traced the shaky handwriting with his finger, wondering who the pregnant woman on the bus was and why she'd picked him. He wasn't anybody special, just a guy trying to get through community college applications and save up for a car. But now he was caught up in something that felt like it belonged in a movie, not his small-town life. He thought about Aisha, her face frozen in time on those old flyers. She'd been a year behind him in school, always with a book in her hand, always quick to smile. He didn't know her well, but he remembered how everyone liked her, how she'd make you feel seen. The idea that she might still be out there, somewhere, made his stomach twist. But where? And what did the creek have to do with it? He decided to start with what he knew. Willow Creek wasn't a big town, maybe a few thousand people, most of whom knew each other's business. If Aisha was alive, someone had to know something. Marcus grabbed his jacket and headed out, the note tucked safely in his pocket. His first stop was the library, a squat brick building where Aisha used to spend hours. The librarian, Mrs. Carter, had been around forever and had a memory like a steel trap. If anyone remembered details about Aisha, it'd be her. The library smelled like old paper and dust, and Mrs. Carter looked up from her desk, her glasses perched on her nose. "Marcus, haven't seen you in a while," she said, her voice warm but curious. He hesitated, then told her about the note, keeping his voice low. Her face tightened at Aisha's name, and she leaned in. "That poor girl," she said, shaking her head. "I always thought there was more to it than what the police said. She was in here all the time, reading about history, old maps, even local legends. Said she was working on a project, but she never told me what." Marcus's ears perked up. "A project? Did she say anything about the creek?" Mrs. Carter frowned, thinking. "Not directly, but she checked out a book about the town's history once, something about the old trails and the land around the creek. I thought it was odd for a kid her age to care about that stuff." She pointed him to the local history section, a dusty corner with books that looked untouched for years. Marcus spent hours flipping through pages, finding old maps of Willow Creek from when it was just a trading post. The creek ran through the heart of town, but the maps showed something else, old paths leading to spots marked private land or abandoned. One map, yellowed and brittle, mentioned a cabin near the creek, long forgotten. Could that be what the note meant? He jotted down notes, his heart racing. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Meanwhile, Detective Laura Hayes was knee-deep in her own search. She sat at her desk, surrounded by files from Aisha's case, the note photocopied and pinned to her bulletin board. She hadn't told anyone else at the station yet, not until she was sure. The Willow Creek Police Department wasn't exactly a hotbed of ambition, and some of her colleagues had already written off the note as a prank. But Laura couldn't shake the feeling that this was real. She'd been a rookie when Aisha disappeared, and the case had stuck with her like a splinter. She remembered the search parties, the dogs sniffing along the creek, the way Aisha's mom, Denise, clutched a photo of her daughter like it could bring her back. Laura pulled out an old report, one she hadn't looked at in years. It mentioned a drifter who'd been in town a month before Aisha vanished, a guy named Ray, mid-30s, who'd worked odd jobs at the lumberyard. He'd left town right after the disappearance, and no one thought much of it at the time. But now Laura wondered, could he have known something? She made a note to track him down, though she knew it'd be a long shot after 3 years. Back in town, Marcus kept digging. He tracked down one of Aisha's old friends, Tasha, who worked at the diner now. Tasha was wiping down counters when Marcus walked in, the bell above the door jingling. She looked tired, her apron stained with coffee, but she smiled when she saw him. "Marcus, what's good?" she said, then froze when he mentioned Aisha. They sat in a booth, and Tasha leaned in, her voice low. "Aisha was my best friend," she said, her eyes distant. She was always talking about getting out of Willow Creek, seeing the world. But she started acting weird that summer. Like, secretive. She'd sneak out at night, said she was meeting someone by the creek. I thought maybe she had a boyfriend, but she wouldn't tell me who. Marcus's pulse quickened. Did she ever mention a project? Or a cabin? Tasha shook her head, but her expression shifted. She did say once that the creek wasn't what it seemed. I didn't know what she meant, and when I asked, she just laughed it off. The more Marcus learned, the more questions he had. Aisha's secret meetings, her interest in the creek, the drifter who vanished. None of it added up, but it all pointed to something hidden in Willow Creek's quiet corners. He decided to check out the creek himself. It was late afternoon when he parked his bike near the water's edge, the same spot where Aisha's bike had been found. The creek was shallow, its banks overgrown with weeds, but it felt eerie in the fading light. He walked along the path, looking for anything out of place. That's when he saw it, a narrow trail, barely visible, leading into the woods. It wasn't on any of the maps he'd seen, but it matched the old stories about hidden paths. His heart pounded as he followed it, branches snagging at his jacket. After 10 minutes, he stumbled on a clearing. There, half hidden by vines, was a crumbling cabin, its windows boarded up, its door hanging off one hinge. Was this what the note meant? He stepped closer, his breath shallow, but stopped when he heard a twig snap behind him. He spun around, but no one was there. Just the wind, he told himself, but his hands were shaking as he biked back to town. Detective Hayes wasn't having better luck. She'd spent the day tracking down leads on the drifter, Ray, but every phone call led to a dead end. The lumberyard had no records, and the guy seemed to have no family, no paper trail. She was starting to wonder if he even existed when her phone rang. It was Denise, Aisha's mom. "I heard about the note," Denise said, her voice trembling. "Is it true? Is my baby alive?" Laura's chest tightened. She wanted to give Denise hope, but she had to be honest. "We don't know yet," she said, "but I'm looking into it. I promise." Denise paused, then said something that made Laura's blood run cold. Aisha used to talk about the creek like it was alive, like it was hiding something. "I thought she was just being a kid," but now, Laura scribbled down the words, her mind racing. The creek again. It was like a thread tying everything together, but she couldn't see the whole picture yet. Marcus, meanwhile, couldn't stop thinking about the cabin. He didn't tell anyone what he'd found, not yet. He wasn't sure who to trust. The pregnant woman's face kept flashing in his mind, her tired eyes, the way her hand shook when she gave him the note. He went back to the moment on the bus, replaying every detail. She'd been wearing a scarf, even though it was warm, and her bag had a logo he didn't recognize, a small embroidered bird. It was a long shot, but he started asking around town, describing the woman. Most people shrugged, but one cashier at the gas station paused. "Sounds like someone I saw a while back," she said. "Came in here a few times. Always paid in cash. Looked like she was running from something." Marcus's stomach dropped. Running from what? Or who? As the days passed, Marcus and Laura's paths started to converge. Laura heard about Marcus asking questions around town and called him into the station. She wasn't thrilled about a kid playing detective, but when he told her about the cabin, her eyes narrowed. "You shouldn't be out there alone," she said, but she didn't dismiss him. Instead, she asked him to show her the spot. They drove to the creek the next morning, the air thick with mist. The cabin looked even creepier in daylight, its walls sagging like it was tired of standing. Laura's flashlight swept over the interior, empty except for a rusted chair and some old newspapers. But under a loose floorboard, she found something that made her breath catch, a bracelet, small and silver, with a charm shaped like a star. It matched the description of one Aisha wore every day. Laura bagged it as evidence, her hands steady, but her mind racing. Was Aisha here? And if so, when? Marcus watched Laura work, his mind spinning. The bracelet was proof the note wasn't a prank, but it raised more questions than answers. Why was it here, in a cabin no one knew about? Who was the pregnant woman, and how did she know Aisha was alive? And why did it feel like someone was watching them, even now? As they left the cabin, Marcus noticed something carved into the doorframe, a crude symbol, like a circle with a slash through it. He didn't know what it meant, but it sent a shiver down his spine. Laura saw it too, her jaw tightening. "We need to keep this quiet," she said. "Someone doesn't want us here." That night, Marcus lay awake, the note's words echoing in his head. He thought about Aisha, about the cabin, about the woman on bus. He thought about the drifter, the bracelet, the symbol on the door. Willow Creek wasn't the sleepy town he'd grown up in. It was hiding something big. And he was starting to feel like he'd opened a door he couldn't close. Across town, Laura sat at her desk, the bracelet in its evidence bag glowing under her lamp. She was close to something. She could feel it, but every step forward felt like a step into danger. The creek was calling, and it wasn't letting go. What was out there, waiting for them? And would they find Aisha, or something much worse? The air in Willow Creek felt heavier now, like the town itself was holding its breath. Marcus couldn't shake the image of the bracelet, its star charm glinting in Laura's flashlight. It was Aisha's, no doubt about it. Denise had described it in every interview, down to the tiny scratch on the clasp. But finding it in that crumbling cabin only deepened the mystery. Was Aisha there recently? Or had it been left behind years ago, a forgotten relic of whatever happened that summer? Marcus sat on his porch, the note in his pocket feeling like it weighed a ton. He hadn't told Laura about the symbol he'd seen carved into the cabin's doorframe, a circle with a slash through it. It felt like a warning, but he didn't know why. He was just a kid, not some detective, yet every instinct told him to keep going, to find out what the pregnant woman knew. Her face haunted him, those tired eyes and that shaky hand. She wasn't just a stranger passing through. She was part of this, somehow. Across town, Laura was wrestling with her own doubts. The bracelet was a solid lead, but it didn't explain anything. She'd sent it to the lab for prints, though she wasn't holding her breath. 3 years of dust and damp would have erased most evidence. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the case files spread across her desk. The drifter, Ray, was still a ghost. Every call she made turned up nothing, but Denise's words kept echoing. Aisha used to talk about the creek like it was alive. Laura pulled out a map of the area, tracing the creek's path with her finger. It wound through Willow Creek like a vein, touching everything: the park, the old mill, the abandoned lots. She circled the spot where the cabin stood, hidden off that unmarked trail. Why hadn't anyone found it during the original search? And who was keeping it hidden now? Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was her partner, Officer Daniels, a grizzled cop who'd been on the force longer than she'd been alive. "Heard you're digging into the Thompson case again," he said, his voice gruff. "Let it go, Laura. Some things are better left buried." She hung up, her jaw tight. Daniels wasn't the only one acting cagey. Half the station seemed to want the case to stay cold. Marcus, meanwhile, was chasing a new lead. He'd remembered something Tasha said at the diner about Aisha meeting someone by the creek. It wasn't much, but it was enough to send him back to the library. Mrs. Carter wasn't there, but a young clerk, Jamie, recognized Marcus from school. "You're asking about Aisha?" Jamie said, glancing around like someone might overhear. "I didn't know her well, but I saw her once that summer. She was arguing with some guy by the creek, older, maybe in his 30s. Looked like he didn't belong here." Marcus's heart skipped. Did he have a name? Anything? Jamie shrugged. Never heard it. But he had a tattoo on his arm, a circle with a line through it. Marcus froze. The symbol from the cabin. He thanked Jamie and left, his mind racing. Was this Ray, the drifter? Or someone else entirely? He needed to tell Laura, but he hesitated. What if the police were part of the reason this case never got solved? Back at the station, Laura was piecing together a subplot of her own. She'd found an old report buried in the archives, one that never made it into the official case file. It was a statement from a shopkeeper who'd seen Aisha talking to a woman near the creek a week before she vanished. The woman was described as young, maybe mid-20s, with a nervous energy and a scarf wrapped around her head. Laura's breath caught. A scarf, just like the pregnant woman Marcus described. Could it be the same person? 3 years older now, maybe pregnant, but still tied to Aisha's story? Laura dug deeper, pulling records of anyone who'd lived in Willow Creek around that time. One name popped up, Sarah Klein, a woman who'd worked at the local bar before leaving town abruptly in '98. No one knew where she went, and no one seemed to care. Laura found a grainy photo from an old employee ID. Sarah's face was half hidden by a scarf, but her eyes were unmistakable. Tired, haunted, just like Marcus said. Marcus wasn't sitting still. He'd started noticing things in town that felt off. A black sedan had been parked across from his house twice that week, its windows too tinted to see inside. At the hardware store, his boss, Mr. Grayson, had asked him pointed questions about where he'd been lately, his tone sharp in a way it never was before. Marcus brushed it off, but the unease lingered. He decided to talk to Aisha's mom, Denise, hoping she might know something about the symbol or the drifter. He found her at the community center, organizing a fundraiser in Aisha's name. Denise's face lit up when she saw him, but it was a fragile kind of hope. "You're the boy with the note," she said, her voice soft. Marcus nodded, unsure how to start. He told her about the cabin, the bracelet, the symbol. Denise's hands trembled as she clutched a locket with Aisha's picture. That star bracelet was her favorite, she said. She never took it off. But that symbol, I saw it once in her notebook. She said it was just a doodle, but she got so quiet when I asked about it. The conversation left Marcus shaken. Aisha had known about the symbol, maybe even before she disappeared. He showed Denise a sketch of it, and her eyes widened. "I've seen that before, not just in her notebook. There's an old shed near the mill. It's got that same mark carved into the door." Marcus's pulse raced. Another lead, another piece of the puzzle. He thanked Denise and promised to keep her posted, but as he left, he felt eyes on him again. He glanced over his shoulder, catching a glimpse of a man in a dark jacket slipping around the corner. Marcus's heart pounded, but he didn't follow. He was starting to realize Willow Creek wasn't as safe as it seemed, and he wasn't sure who he could trust anymore, not even the people he'd known his whole life. Laura, too, was hitting walls. She'd tracked down an address for Sarah Klein's sister, who lived an hour away in a neighboring town. The sister, Emily, was reluctant to talk, but Laura pressed. Sarah was scared, Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She left Willow Creek right after that girl went missing. Said she saw something she shouldn't have, but she wouldn't tell me what. She was always looking over her shoulder, like someone was after her. Laura's mind raced. Was Sarah the woman on the bus? Had she seen what happened to Aisha? Emily didn't have much else, just an old postcard from Sarah, postmarked 2 years ago from a town called Millhaven. Laura made a note to check it out, but her gut told her time was running out. Someone in Willow Creek was watching, and they didn't want this case reopened. The subplot with the drifter took a darker turn when Laura got a call from an old contact at the state police. They'd found a record of a Ray Sullivan, a transient who'd been arrested for petty theft in '99, not far from Willow Creek. His file mentioned a tattoo, a circle with a slash. Laura's heart sank. The same symbol, again. Ray was long gone, last seen in a halfway house that burned down a year ago, but the tattoo tied him to the cabin, to Aisha, to everything. Laura started to wonder if the symbol was more than just a mark. Was it a sign? A code? She remembered the rumors about the creek, old stories of secret meetings and shady deals. Willow Creek had always seemed like a quiet town, but maybe it was hiding a network, people who knew more than they let on. Marcus decided to check out the shed Denise mentioned. It was tucked behind the old mill, a rusted relic from the town's lumber days. The sun was setting as he approached, the air thick with the smell of damp wood. The shed was locked, but sure enough, the symbol was carved into the door, faint but unmistakable. He tugged at the padlock, but it wouldn't budge. That's when he heard it, a low hum, like a car engine idling nearby. He ducked behind a stack of crates, his heart in his throat. The black sedan from his street rolled by slowly, its headlights off. Marcus held his breath, watching as it circled the mill and disappeared into the trees. He didn't know who was driving, but he knew they weren't just passing through. He waited until the coast was clear, then ran home, his mind buzzing with questions. Was the sedan following him? Did it have something to do with the cabin, the shed, the note? Laura was starting to feel the same pressure. She'd gone back to the cabin alone, hoping to find more clues, but the place felt different now. Too quiet, too still. She noticed fresh footprints in the mud outside, too big to be Marcus's. Someone else had been there, and recently. She took photos, her hands steady despite the knot in her stomach. Back at the station, she overheard Daniels talking to the chief, their voices low. "She's stirring things up," Daniels said. "It's not good for the town." Laura pretended not to hear, but her mind was racing. Was Daniels involved? Was the whole department? She thought about Aisha, about Marcus, about the pregnant woman who might be Sarah Klein. The pieces were there, but they didn't fit yet, and every step forward felt like a step into a trap. Marcus couldn't sleep that night. He kept seeing the symbol, the sedan, the bracelet. He thought about Aisha, about her secret project, her late-night walks. He thought about the pregnant woman, her cryptic note, her scared eyes. And he thought about the creek, always the creek, tying it all together like a dark thread. He wanted to tell Laura about the shed, the sedan, the symbol in Aisha's notebook, but he wasn't sure she'd believe him, or if she was even on his side. The town felt like it was closing in, its secrets bubbling up like water from the creek's muddy banks. Laura, too, was wide awake, staring at the postcard from Millhaven. She knew she was close to something big, something dangerous. The symbol, the cabin, the shed, they were all connected, but to what? And who was trying to keep it buried? The answers were out there, somewhere in the shadows of Willow Creek, and they were running out of time to find them. The days were getting shorter in Willow Creek, and the chill in the air seemed to carry a warning. Marcus felt it every time he stepped outside, like the town was watching him, waiting for him to slip up. The black sedan hadn't shown up again, but the memory of it circling the mill stuck with him, a shadow he couldn't shake. He hadn't told Laura about the shed or the symbol in Aisha's notebook, not yet. He wanted to trust her, but Officer Daniels' words kept echoing in his head, the way he'd told Laura to let the case go. Marcus wasn't a kid anymore, not after finding that bracelet, not after seeing that symbol carved into the shed's door. He was in too deep, and the note in his pocket, "Aisha's alive. Don't trust the creek," felt like a ticking clock. He couldn't stop now, not when he was so close to something, even if he didn't know what. Laura was feeling the pressure too. The station was quiet, too quiet, and she couldn't ignore the way her colleagues avoided her eyes when she mentioned Aisha's case. The lab results on the bracelet had come back inconclusive. No prints, no DNA, just years of grime. But the star charm was unmistakable, and it kept her up at night, glinting in her dreams like a beacon. She'd been digging into Sarah Klein, the woman who might be the pregnant stranger from the bus. The postcard from Millhaven was her only lead, but when she called the post office there, they had no record of Sarah. It was another dead end, but Laura's gut told her Sarah was the key. She'd seen something back in '98, something that scared her enough to run. Laura decided to drive to Millhaven herself, hoping to find a trace of the woman who'd handed Marcus that note. But before she left, she needed to check the shed Denise had mentioned. If it had the same symbol as the cabin, it could tie everything together. Marcus was one step ahead. He'd gone back to the shed by the mill, this time at dusk, when the shadows stretched long and jagged. The padlock was still there, rusted but solid, and the carved symbol, a circle with a slash, seemed to stare back at him. He'd brought a flashlight and a crowbar from the hardware store, his hands sweaty as he wedged the bar into the lock. It didn't budge at first, but after a few hard yanks, the metal gave way with a loud snap. The door creaked open, and the smell hit him, damp wood, mildew, and something sharp, like old gasoline. Inside, the shed was a mess. Stacks of crates, a broken chair, and a pile of tarps in the corner. He swept his flashlight over the walls, looking for anything that might connect to Aisha. That's when he saw it. Another symbol, this one scratched into the wood, fainter, like someone had tried to erase it. Marcus's heart pounded. He moved the tarps, revealing a trapdoor in the floor. His hands shook as he lifted it, the hinges groaning. Below was a dark, narrow space, barely big enough for a person. He shone his light down, and his breath caught. A small, crumpled blanket, stained and tattered, lay at the bottom. Was this where Aisha had been? He climbed down, his pulse racing, and picked up the blanket. Tucked inside was a piece of paper, folded and yellowed. He opened it, his hands trembling. It was a drawing of the creek, with a red X marked near the cabin. At the bottom, in Aisha's handwriting, were the words, "He knows." Laura arrived at the mill just as Marcus climbed out of the shed, his face pale in the dim light. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed, grabbing his arm. He jumped, nearly dropping the paper. "I found something," he stammered, showing her the drawing. Laura's eyes widened as she read the words, her mind racing. He knows. Who was he? Ray the Drifter? Someone else? She took the paper, her hands steady, but her heart pounding. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but her voice was softer now, almost scared. She shone her flashlight into the trapdoor, her jaw tightening. "This wasn't here in '98, she said. "Someone's been using this place since then." Marcus swallowed hard. "You think Aisha was down there?" Laura didn't answer, but her silence was enough. She bagged the paper and blanket as evidence, her mind spinning. The symbol, the bracelet, the drawing, everything was pointing to the creek, but the pieces still didn't fit. Back at the station, Laura locked the evidence in her desk and called Marcus. "Meet me tomorrow morning," she said. "We're going to Millhaven. Don't tell anyone." Marcus agreed, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. That night, he dreamed of the creek, its water dark and endless, and Aisha's face staring up at him from the depths. He woke up sweating, the note still in his pocket like a curse. He didn't know what they'd find in Millhaven, but he knew it was dangerous. The sedan, the symbol, the whispers around town, someone didn't want them digging, and they were getting closer to whoever it was. In Millhaven, the air was thick with the smell of rain and diesel. Laura and Marcus pulled up to a rundown motel where Sarah Klein's last known address was registered. The clerk, a bored man with a cigarette dangling from his lip, barely looked up when Laura showed her badge. "Sarah Klein?" "Yeah, she was here a while back," he said, flipping through a ledger. "Room 12. Haven't seen her in months." Laura's heart sank, but she asked for the key anyway. The room was small, musty, with a single bed and a cracked mirror. Marcus poked around while Laura checked the drawers. In the closet, hidden behind a pile of hangers, was a small box. Inside were photos, grainy snapshots of Willow Creek, the creek itself, and one of Aisha, smiling at a picnic. Marcus's hands shook as he held it up. "This is her," he whispered. Laura nodded, her throat tight. At the bottom of the box was a letter, unsealed, addressed to no one. It read, "I saw it. I can't stay. The creek hides everything." Laura's blood ran cold. Sarah had been there that summer, and she'd seen something that made her run. As they left the motel, Marcus noticed a man across the street, leaning against a lamppost, his face half hidden by a hood. The same dark jacket, the same uneasy feeling. "Laura," Marcus whispered, nudging her. She followed his gaze, her hand instinctively moving to her holster. The man turned and vanished into an alley, too fast to follow. "Let's go," Laura said, her voice low. They drove back to Willow Creek in silence, the weight of the photos and the letter heavy between them. Marcus kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting the black sedan to appear. Laura's mind was racing. Sarah, Ray, the symbol, the shed. It was all connected, but how? And why was the town so determined to keep it buried? Back in Willow Creek, Denise was waiting at the station. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "Did you find anything?" she asked. Laura hesitated, then showed her the photo of Aisha. Denise's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling over. "That's from the day before she disappeared," she whispered. Marcus felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to tell her about the shed, the drawing, but Laura shot him a look that said to keep quiet. "We're getting closer," Laura said gently. "I promise." But as Denise left, Laura's face darkened. She pulled Marcus aside. "Someone's been in my office," she said. "The files on my desk were moved. We need to be careful." Marcus's stomach dropped. The station wasn't safe. The town wasn't safe. And the creek was at the center of it all. That night, Marcus went back to the creek alone. He couldn't explain why. He just needed to see it again, to feel the weight of it. The water was black under the moonlight, the air thick with the hum of crickets. He stood where Aisha's bike had been found, his flashlight sweeping the banks. That's when he saw it, a glint of metal in the mud. He knelt down, digging with his hands, and pulled out a small key, rusted but intact. It looked like it fit a padlock, maybe the one from the shed. His heart raced as he slipped it into his pocket, but before he could stand, he heard footsteps behind him. Slow, deliberate, crunching on the gravel. He froze, his flashlight trembling in his hand. "Who's there?" he called, his voice cracking. No answer, just the sound of the creak and the thud of his own heartbeat. He turned, shining the light, but the figure was gone, swallowed by the dark. Laura wasn't sleeping either. She sat at her kitchen table, the photos and letters spread out in front of her. The symbol kept appearing in her mind. The cabin, the shed, Aisha's notebook, Ray's tattoo. It wasn't just a mark, it was a message, a warning. She thought about Daniels, his gruff advice to let it go. She thought about the chief, who'd been too quick to dismiss the note. And she thought about Marcus, a kid who'd stumbled into something bigger than he could handle. She called him, her voice urgent. "Meet me at the creek at dawn," she said. "Bring that key." Marcus didn't ask why. He could hear the fear in her voice. As he hung up, he looked out his window, half expecting to see the sedan. The street was empty, but the darkness felt alive, pressing in on all sides. The creek was waiting for them, its secrets buried in the mud and shadows. Laura and Marcus stood at the edge, the key in his hand, the note in her pocket. The shed, the cabin, the symbol, they were all pointing to this moment, this place. But someone was out there, watching, waiting. The air was thick with tension, the silence louder than any sound. They were so close to the truth, but every step felt like a trap. What was the key hiding? Who was the man in the dark jacket? And what did Sarah see that made her run? The answers were there, in the heart of Willow Creek, but they weren't ready for what was coming. Dawn broke over Willow Creek, painting the sky a bruised purple as Marcus and Laura stood by the creek, the air thick with mist and unspoken fear. Marcus clutched the rusted key he'd found in the mud, its weight heavy in his hand, while Laura held the note, its words, "Aisha's alive. Don't trust the creek," burning in her mind. The water gurgled softly, almost mocking them, as they stared at the path leading to the shed. The symbol, the bracelet, the drawing, the photos from Millhaven, everything pointed here, to this moment. But the footsteps Marcus heard last night lingered in his memory, and Laura's warning about her tampered files echoed in his ears. Someone was watching, and they were closing in. Marcus's heart pounded as he handed Laura the key. "You think it fits the shed?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Laura nodded, her eyes scanning the trees. "Only one way to find out," she said, but her hand hovered over her holster, betraying her unease. They were so close to answers, but the silence around them felt like a trap waiting to spring. They trudged toward the shed, the gravel crunching under their boots. The mill loomed in the distance, its rusted skeleton a reminder of Willow Creek's forgotten past. The shed's door was still ajar from Marcus's break-in, the carved symbol, a circle with a slash, staring back like an accusation. Laura tested the key in the padlock's remains, but it didn't fit. She frowned, turning it over in her hand. "This isn't for the door," she said, her voice tight. "It's for something else." Marcus's stomach twisted. He thought of the trapdoor inside, the blanket, the drawing with Aisha's handwriting. He knows. Before he could speak, Laura pushed the door open, her flashlight cutting through the shed's gloom. The trapdoor was still there, its edges worn but sturdy. She knelt, testing the key in a small lock embedded in the wood. It clicked, and the trapdoor creaked open, revealing a deeper chamber than Marcus had seen before, a narrow tunnel, its walls damp and lined with roots. Laura's breath caught. "This wasn't in the original search," she whispered. "This is new." Marcus's pulse raced as they descended, the air growing colder, thicker, like the earth was swallowing them. The tunnel was tight, barely wide enough for one person, and the smell of wet dirt and decay made Marcus's skin crawl. Laura's flashlight flickered, casting jagged shadows on the walls. At the end of the tunnel was a metal door, rusted but solid, with the same symbol etched into it. Laura tried the key again, and it turned with a grinding screech. The door swung open, revealing a small, concrete room. Inside was a single chair, a flickering lantern, and a pile of papers scattered on the floor. Marcus's heart stopped as he recognized Aisha's handwriting on one, a list of names, dates, and places, with the creek circled in red. At the top, in bold letters, was a name, Ray Sullivan. Laura's eyes widened. "The drifter," she said, her voice shaking. But before they could process it, a faint noise echoed from the tunnel behind them, a low, deliberate scrape, like boots on stone. They froze, Laura's hand on her gun, Marcus's breath shallow. "Stay behind me," she whispered, but her voice wavered. The scraping stopped, replaced by a heavy silence that felt alive with menace. Marcus's mind raced. Had the man in the dark jacket followed them? Or was it someone else, someone tied to the names on Aisha's list? Laura grabbed the papers, stuffing them into her jacket, and motioned for Marcus to move. They backed out of the room, the lanterns flicker, making their shadows dance like ghosts. As they reached the tunnel, a figure loomed at the entrance, a silhouette, tall and broad, blocking their way out. Laura raised her gun, her voice sharp. "Who's there? Show yourself." The figure didn't move, didn't speak. Then, in a low, gravelly voice, it said, "You shouldn't be here." Marcus's blood ran cold. It wasn't Ray. His file said he was dead, but the voice felt familiar, like a memory he couldn't place. Before Laura could respond, the figure vanished into the dark, leaving only the echo of footsteps fading up the tunnel. Laura and Marcus scrambled out, their hearts pounding as they emerged into the shed. The morning air felt sharp, but it did nothing to ease the panic clawing at them. Laura clutched the papers, her face pale. "We need to get these to the station," she said, but Marcus grabbed her arm. "You said someone's been in your office," he said, his voice urgent. "What if it's not safe?" Laura hesitated, her eyes darting to the trees. He was right, the station wasn't safe, not with Daniels and the chief acting strange, not with her files being tampered with. But they couldn't stay here, not with someone lurking in the shadows. "We'll go to my place," she said finally. "It's the only place I trust right now." They hurried to her car, Marcus glancing over his shoulder every few steps, half expecting the black sedan to appear. The creek gurgled behind them, its secrets growing louder, more insistent. At Laura's house, they spread the papers on her kitchen table, the dim light casting long shadows. The list was a puzzle, names of people Marcus didn't recognize, dates going back to the 90s, and locations around Willow Creek, all tied to the creek. One name stood out, Grayson. Marcus's breath caught. "That's my boss," he said, his voice barely audible. "Mr. Grayson, from the hardware store." Laura's eyes narrowed. "He's on here, with a date from July 98, the month Aisha disappeared." Marcus felt sick. Grayson had always been gruff but fair, asking Marcus about his college plans, giving him extra shifts. But now he remembered the way Grayson's questions had turned sharp, how he'd lingered too long when Marcus mentioned the creek. Was he part of this? Had he known about Aisha all along? The second plot twist hit when Laura found a photo tucked among the papers, a Polaroid of Aisha, not from 98, but recent, her face older, thinner, her eyes hollow. She was standing by the creek, the same star bracelet on her wrist, and behind her was a man. His face was blurred, but the tattoo on his arm was clear, a circle with a slash. Marcus's hands shook as he stared at it. "This is new," he whispered. "She's alive, Laura. This proves it." Laura's jaw tightened, but her eyes were wide with something close to fear. "This changes everything," she said. "If Aisha's alive, someone's been hiding her. And they're still here." The photo was dated on the back, 2 months ago. Marcus's mind reeled. Aisha was out there somewhere, and someone in Willow Creek knew where. But the list, the symbol, Grayson's name, it all pointed to a conspiracy deeper than they'd imagined, one that reached into the heart of the town. As they pored over the papers, A knock at the door made them jump. Laura grabbed her gun, motioning for Marcus to stay quiet. She crept to the window, peering through the blinds. It was Denise, Aisha's mom, her face pale and frantic. "I found something," Denise said when Laura let her in, her voice trembling. She held out a small journal, its pages worn and stained. It was Aisha's. "I thought I'd lost it, but it was in a box in the attic." Marcus opened it, his heart racing. The pages were filled with Aisha's handwriting, notes about the creek, sketches of the symbol, and a name repeated over and over. The Watcher. Laura's breath hitched. "Who's the Watcher?" she asked, but Denise shook her head, tears in her eyes. "I don't know. She never told me. But she was scared, Laura. She wrote that the Watcher was always there, always watching the creek." The stakes were higher now, the air thick with dread. Marcus's mind flashed to the man in the dark jacket, the voice in the tunnel, the sedan circling the mill. Was that the Watcher? Or was it Grayson, or someone else on the list? Laura's phone buzzed, and she glanced at it, her face going pale. It was a text from an unknown number. "Stop looking, or you're next." Marcus saw it too, his throat tightening. "They know we're here," he said, his voice shaking. Laura nodded, her hand steady on her gun. "We need to move," she said. "The creek, the shed, the tunnel, it's all connected. We're going back tonight." Marcus wanted to protest, to say it was too dangerous, but the photo of Aisha, alive and haunted, burned in his mind. He couldn't turn back now. As they prepared to leave, Marcus noticed something in the journal. A map, hand-drawn, with the creek at its center. The red X from the shed's drawing was there, but so was another mark, deeper in the woods, labeled the Hollow. Laura's eyes narrowed. "I know that place," she said. "It's an old quarry, abandoned years ago. No one goes there." Marcus's heart pounded. The Hollow, the Watcher, the tunnel, everything was converging, pulling them toward a truth that felt more dangerous with every step. They grabbed their flashlights and headed out, the night closing in around them. The creek was waiting, its secrets ready to spill, but so was the Watcher, hidden in the shadows, ready to strike. They were walking into the heart of the mystery, and there was no turning back. The night was black as ink as Laura and Marcus trekked through the woods toward the Hollow, their flashlights cutting thin beams through the dense trees. The air was thick with the smell of pine and damp earth, and every rustle made Marcus's heart jump. Laura led the way, her gun holstered but her hand close, her face set with a determination that barely masked her fear. The journal's map, clutched in Marcus's hand, showed the Hollow just beyond the creek, a forgotten quarry where the town's secrets seemed to converge. Aisha's note. "Aisha's alive. Don't trust the creek," felt heavier than ever, and the Polaroid of her, recent and haunting, burned in Marcus's mind. The Watcher, the symbol, the tunnel, Grayson's name on the list, they were all leading here, to this moment. The text from the unknown number, "Stop looking or you're next," echoed like a warning, but they couldn't stop now. The creek's gurgle faded behind them as they pushed deeper into the woods, the silence growing louder, more oppressive. They were walking into the heart of Willow Creek's mystery, and the stakes had never been higher. The Hollow came into view, a gaping scar in the earth, its jagged walls looming like silent sentinels. The quarry was abandoned, overgrown with vines, but a faint glow flickered from its depths, unnatural in the midnight dark. Laura signaled for Marcus to stay low, her eyes scanning the shadows. They crept closer, following a narrow path down into the quarry. At the bottom, hidden behind a pile of rubble, was a metal door, rusted and scarred, with a familiar symbol, a circle with a slash, etched deep into its surface. Marcus's breath caught. It was the same symbol from the cabin, the shed, Aisha's notebook, Ray's tattoo. Laura tried the key from the creek, and it turned with a grinding click. The door creaked open, revealing a damp, concrete chamber lit by a single flickering bulb. The air was stale, heavy with the smell of mold and something metallic. On the far wall, chained to a pipe, was Aisha. Marcus's heart stopped. She was alive, just like the note said, but she looked nothing like the girl from the flyers. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow, her star bracelet glinting dully on her wrist. She stirred at the sound of the door, her head lifting slowly, like she wasn't sure they were real. "Aisha," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. Laura rushed forward, checking the chains, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the key. It didn't fit the lock, but she pulled a tool from her belt, working frantically to pry it open. Aisha's voice was barely audible, cracked from disuse. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her eyes darting to the door. "He's coming." Laura froze, her hand on the chain. "Who?" she asked, but before Aisha could answer, a shadow filled the doorway. It was the man in the dark jacket, his face finally clear in the dim light. It wasn't Ray Sullivan. It was Mr. Grayson, Marcus's boss. Marcus's knees buckled. Grayson, the man who'd given him his first job, who'd asked about his college plans, stood there with a coldness in his eyes Marcus had never seen. "You couldn't leave it alone," Grayson said, his voice low, almost regretful. He held a gun, its barrel glinting in the flickering light. Laura stepped in front of Marcus, her own gun raised. "Put it down, Grayson," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "It's over." Grayson shook his head, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "It's never over. You don't know what you've stepped into." Marcus's mind raced, Grayson's name on Aisha's list, the symbol, the sedan. He was the watcher, or at least part of it. "Why?" Marcus stammered, his voice shaking. "Why, Aisha?" Grayson's eyes flickered to her, and for a moment, something like pain crossed his face. "She saw too much," he said. "She was poking around the creek, asking questions about things she shouldn't have. We couldn't let her talk." Laura's jaw tightened as she pieced it together. "We," she said. "Who else, Grayson? Daniels?" "The chief." Grayson's silence was answer enough. The conspiracy ran deeper than they'd thought, a network of secrets tied to the creek, to the symbol, to the town itself. Aisha's project, her late-night walks, her sketches, they'd uncovered something Willow Creek's powerful wanted buried. Laura kept her gun trained on Grayson, her voice sharp. "Let her go, and we can talk." Grayson laughed, a hollow sound. "You think you can walk out of here? You think they'll let you?" Before Laura could respond, a noise echoed from above, a low rumble, like an engine. The black sedan. Marcus's heart sank. Grayson wasn't alone. The tension snapped as Laura lunged, slamming her shoulder into Grayson. The gun went off, the shot deafening in the small room, but it hit the ceiling, sending dust raining down. Marcus dove for Aisha, shielding her as Laura wrestled Grayson to the ground. "Get her out," Laura shouted, pinning Grayson's arm. Marcus scrambled to the chains, his hands shaking as he helped Laura free Aisha. Her wrists were raw, her body weak, but she clung to him, her eyes wide with fear. "The creek," she whispered. "It's not just me. There's more." Marcus didn't understand, but there was no time to ask. Footsteps pounded above, heavy and fast. Laura handcuffed Grayson to the pipe, her face grim. "We need to move," she said, grabbing the papers from the table, Aisha's list, proof of the conspiracy. They stumbled out of the chamber, Aisha leaning on Marcus, her steps unsteady. The quarry was a maze of shadows, the sedan's headlights cutting through the dark above. Laura led them to a narrow ledge, her flashlight flickering as they climbed. "There's a back way out," she whispered, her voice urgent. "Keep moving." But as they reached the top, a figure stepped into their path, Officer Daniels, his face hard, his gun raised. "You should have listened, Laura," he said. Marcus's heart stopped. Daniels was part of it, just like Grayson. Laura didn't flinch, her gun steady. "You're done, Daniels," she said. "We've got Aisha. We've got the list." Daniels's eyes flickered to Aisha, then back to Laura. "You think that matters?" he said. "You think you can stop this?" Before Laura could answer, Aisha spoke, her voice weak but clear. "The creek," she said. "They're hiding something there. It's bigger than me." The standoff stretched, the air thick with tension. Marcus's mind raced, Aisha's words, the list, the symbol. What were they hiding? What was worth keeping Aisha locked away for 3 years? Laura's voice cut through the silence. Drop the gun, Daniels. We're walking out of here. But Daniels's finger tightened on the trigger, his eyes cold. Marcus braced himself, Aisha's weight heavy against him, when a new sound broke the night, a woman's voice, sharp and desperate. Stop. It was Sarah Klein, the pregnant woman from the bus, her scarf gone, her face pale but fierce. She held a phone, its screen glowing with a live feed. It's streaming, she said, her voice shaking. Everything Grayson, the list, the creek. It's all online now. Daniels's face twisted with rage, but he froze, the gun wavering. Sarah's eyes met Marcus's, and he saw the same fear, the same resolve. She'd been running, hiding, but she'd come back to end this. The final twist came as Daniels lowered his gun, his shoulders slumping. You don't understand, he said, his voice breaking. It's not just us. The creek, it's not what you think. Before he could explain, sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Sarah's stream had reached someone, state police, maybe, or someone outside Willow Creek's grip. Laura kept her gun on Daniels, her face hard. We'll find out, she said. All of it. Marcus helped Aisha toward the path, his heart pounding. They'd found her. They'd exposed the conspiracy, but Daniels's words lingered. What was the creek hiding? As the sirens grew louder, Marcus glanced back at the quarry, the symbol etched in his mind. Aisha was free, Grayson and Daniels were caught, but the creek's secrets weren't done with them. Sarah's stream had saved them, but it had also opened a door to something bigger, something Willow Creek had buried for years. The truth was out, but it wasn't over, not yet. The wail of sirens grew louder as Marcus helped Aisha stumble along the quarry's edge, her frail body leaning heavily against him. Laura kept her gun trained on Officer Daniels, her eyes never leaving his face, while Sarah Klein stood firm, her phone still streaming the truth to the world. The black sedan's headlights had vanished, swallowed by the night, but its presence lingered like a ghost. Marcus's heart was still racing, the weight of the moment crushing. Aisha was alive, right here in his arms, but her whispered words, "It's not just me. There's more," echoed in his head. Grayson was cuffed in the chamber below, Daniels was cornered, and Sarah's live feed had exposed Willow Creek secrets, but the final twist, Daniels's cryptic warning about the creek, left a knot in Marcus's stomach. What was still hidden? What had Aisha uncovered that was worth all this? The state police cars screeched into the quarry, their lights slicing through the dark, and Marcus knew this was the end, or at least, the beginning of the end. As officers swarmed the scene, Laura lowered her gun but kept Daniels in her sights until a state trooper took over, cuffing him with a grim nod. Aisha was whisked away by paramedics, her star bracelet glinting as they wrapped her in a blanket. Marcus wanted to go with her, to make sure she was okay, but Laura grabbed his arm. We need to talk to Sarah, she said, her voice low but urgent. Sarah was still standing there, her phone now lowered, her face pale but resolute. I couldn't stay quiet anymore, she said, her voice trembling. I saw what happened that summer and I ran. But when I saw you on the bus, Marcus, I knew you were the one to trust. Marcus's throat tightened. The note, Aisha's alive. Don't trust the creek, had been her desperate attempt to break the silence, to right a wrong she'd carried for 3 years. What did you see? Laura asked, her eyes searching Sarah's face. Sarah took a shaky breath. It was Grayson and Daniels, she said. They were at the creek with Aisha that night. I didn't know what they were doing, but I saw them take her. I was too scared to stay. The state police were already moving, cordoning off the quarry and hauling Grayson out of the chamber. Marcus watched as they loaded him into a van, his face blank, like he'd already given up. Daniels, too, was silent, his earlier defiance replaced by a hollow stare. But Aisha's words kept gnawing at Marcus. There's more. He turned to Laura, his voice urgent. She said it's not just her. What's in the creek? Laura's jaw tightened, and she pulled out the papers they'd found in the chamber, Aisha's list, the map, the Polaroid. We need to find out, she said. Now. The state police agreed to search the creek at first light, but Marcus couldn't wait. He slipped away while Laura was briefing the troopers, heading back to the water's edge. The creek was quiet now, its surface glassy under the moonlight, but it felt alive, like it was hiding something just beneath. Marcus stood where he'd found the key, his flashlight sweeping the banks. Aisha's journal had mentioned the hollow, but also the creek itself, marked with that red X. He waded in, the cold water soaking his shoes, and felt something hard under his foot. He knelt, digging through the mud, and pulled up a small, locked box, its surface rusted but intact. The key from the creek fit perfectly, and the lid popped open with a creak. Inside was a bundle of letters, waterlogged but legible, and a small, leather-bound notebook. Marcus's hands shook as he opened it. It was Aisha's, filled with notes about the creek, the symbol, and a chilling phrase. The shipments come at night. His mind raced. Shipments of what? Drugs? Something worse? The letters were from Ray Sullivan, the drifter, addressed to someone unnamed, warning them to keep the creek clear. Marcus's heart sank. Aisha had stumbled onto something big, something that Grayson, Daniels, and others in Willow Creek were desperate to hide. By the time Marcus got back to the quarry, Laura was waiting, her face pale with worry. "You can't run off like that," she snapped, but her eyes softened when she saw the box. They sat in her car, poring over the letters and notebook under the dashboard light. The pieces were falling into place. Aisha's project hadn't just been a school assignment. She'd been investigating rumors of illegal activity at the creek, something tied to the mill and the quarry. The symbol, the circle with a slash, was a marker, a code used by a network smuggling goods through Willow Creek's backwoods. Grayson and Daniels were part of it, along with others. Names on Aisha's list that included the chief, a local businessman, and even Mrs. Carter, the librarian, who'd been too quick to point Marcus to the history section. The creek was their cover, a quiet route for moving contraband under the town's nose. Aisha had gotten too close, seen too much, and they'd taken her to keep her quiet. Laura's hands trembled as she read the notebook. "This is why they didn't want the case reopened," she said, her voice thick with anger. They weren't just hiding Aisha, they were protecting their operation. Marcus felt sick. The town he'd grown up in, the people he'd trusted, had been part of something dark, something that had stolen 3 years of Aisha's life. He thought of her frail figure, her hollow eyes, and the weight of what she'd endured hit him hard. "What do we do now?" he asked. Laura's jaw set. "We give this to the state police. All of it. They can't cover this up anymore." She paused, her eyes meeting his. "You did this, Marcus. You brought her home." Marcus shook his head, his throat tight. "Sarah did. And Aisha. She never gave up." The next morning, the state police swarmed the creek, divers pulling up more boxes hidden in the mud, crates filled with cash, documents, and strange packages wrapped in plastic. The news spread fast, and Willow Creek was no longer the sleepy town it had pretended to be. Reporters descended, cameras flashing as Grayson, Daniels, and the chief were led away in cuffs. Mrs. Carter was questioned, her face pale as she claimed she only kept an eye out for the others. The businessman, a man named Hargrove who owned half the town, fled before he could be arrested, his car last seen crossing state lines. Aisha was in the hospital, weak but recovering, her mom by her side. Marcus visited her, bringing the star bracelet Laura had returned. Aisha's smile was small but real, and when she took his hand, she whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." Marcus's eyes stung. He hadn't realized how much her survival meant until that moment, how much her strength had carried them all. Sarah Klein became the town's unlikely hero. Her live stream had gone viral, shared across platforms, exposing Willow Creek's secrets to the world. She sat with Laura and Marcus at the hospital, telling them the rest of her story. She'd worked at the bar in '98, overhearing Grayson and Daniels talk about cleaning up after Aisha saw their operation. She'd fled to Millhaven, terrified, but guilt had eaten at her for years. When she saw Marcus on the bus, his kindness reminded her of Aisha, and she'd slipped him the note, hoping he'd do what she couldn't. "I thought I was too late," she said, tears in her eyes. "But you proved me wrong." Laura squeezed her hand, her own eyes wet. "You saved her, Sarah. You saved all of us." The creek was cordoned off for weeks, the state police uncovering more evidence, hidden routes, coded messages, even a small boat used for late-night runs. Ray Sullivan, it turned out, wasn't dead. He'd faked his death after the halfway house fire, slipping away to avoid the network's wrath. His letters in the box were a desperate attempt to warn Aisha, who he'd befriended that summer. He'd seen her curiosity, her questions about the creek, and tried to protect her, but he'd been too late. Aisha's recovery was slow, but her spirit was unbroken. She started writing again, not about the creek this time, but about her own story, her resilience a beacon for others. Denise, her mom, rebuilt their home with laughter and love, though the scars of those 3 years would never fully fade. Marcus went back to the hardware store, now under new management, and applied to college, his dreams no longer just a distant hope. Laura was promoted, her dogged pursuit of the truth earning her respect beyond Willow Creek. Sarah welcomed her baby, a girl she named Hope, a quiet tribute to the second chance she'd helped give Aisha. The town itself changed, quieter now, humbler, as residents grappled with the betrayal of those they'd trusted. The creek, once a place of secrets, became a symbol of truth, its banks no longer hiding darkness, but reflecting the light of justice. The key takeaway was clear. One small act, like giving up a seat on a bus, could spark a chain of events that changed everything. Willow Creek's mystery was solved, but its lesson lingered. Secrets can't stay hidden forever, and the truth, no matter how deep it's buried, will always find a way to the surface. Marcus walked by the creek one last time, the water calm now, the symbol's shadow gone. He tossed a pebble into the current, watching it ripple, and smiled. Aisha was home, the Watcher was gone, and Willow Creek was free, at least for now.